ASU's Pro Day was yesterday, and we're going to recap it on this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
Are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you get an update when we post new content. Stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Let's talk Pro Day. Let's talk ASU and the guys that are hoping to continue their football careers to the next level at the NFL, at the professional stage. And a handful of these guys really made some really good progress for themselves. I think we can start the conversation with the guy that most people were familiar with in NFL draft circles heading into the Pro Day, and that's Nesta Jade Silvera. Silvera was the lone invite to Arizona State to the Combine this past March. Right, wrong, or indifferent, he was the only guy who ended up making it out there, and there were several other guys who we will discuss in a little bit here who definitely deserved the honor and showed out at the Pro Day. But for Nesta, not too much more to report than what we already know. He ended up deciding to kind of stand on a lot of the measurables that he had put out in Indianapolis, including his 5.15 40-yard dash, his 29.5-inch vertical, and his 9'2" broad jump. Stood on those, looked very good in the combine. He bends very well. He's very fluid for a guy who's 304 pounds, and the tape shows that as well. Like the production, no, he's not a big sack guy. He's not this box score stuffing machine, but he is a very good football player, and if you watch the tape, it stands out. He decided to stand on most of those numbers. He did not do the bench press at the Combine. He did do that at ASU's Pro Day and ended up tossing up a pretty respectable 21 reps. Nothing too crazy. I mean, obviously he's not, oh man, Stephen Pea, was that the dude who threw up almost 40 reps a handful of years back? But he is still plenty strong for his position. Bottom line here, like I said, there's not too much more to really report on with Nesta because he did decide to kind of stay pat with the numbers that he had posted previously, but he did participate with some of the other stuff that was going around with the team, and more than anything, he really showed out as like a vocal, inspirational leader for his teammates during the Pro Day. This was something that, a lot of us had come to know for Nesta last season. He was that vocal guy. He was going to be the rah-rah, get everyone pumped, excited, and bought in. And he was doing the exact same thing yesterday at the gym for Arizona State. As he was generating the buzz. He was getting all of his teammates riled up. He was getting the guys who weren't at ASU last year. By the way, I forgot to mention 15 players for ASU from last year's team, and then 3 kids who were Valley kids that didn't attend Arizona State were invited to the Pro Day. But Nesta treated all of them like his brothers, and he lifted all of them up and got them all really excited and ready to go for that next level. So bottom line here, didn't do anything to hurt himself. I don't know if he did anything to really like blow people away and like knock them up around higher, but I think Nesta is definitely going to get drafted. I think of all the Sun Devils that are in this year's pool, he feels like the safest bet. But if it's not him, then it's got to be X Vallladay, who we're going to talk about right now, because Valladay was an absolute snub from the Combine. There was absolutely no reason that he should not have gone to Indianapolis this past February, March. And he ended up putting on a spectacle in Tempe, which is not anything that we weren't surprised about. Measured in at 5'11", 204 pounds, perfect size for a running back as far as I'm concerned. Great testing numbers. 22 bench reps for a dude that's 204 pounds and is a running back and isn't going to be trying to supplant defensive tackles in the trenches. That's pretty good. That's 2 more reps than Rashad White had thrown up last year. He had a 40-inch vertical. He was one of 3 Sun Devils with a 40-inch vertical. We'll talk about the other guys later. And his estimated 40 time, I couldn't find a concrete number, was estimated in the mid to low 4.4s. Again, it's a really good number for him without having anything official. I feel like he was probably like a 4.5 guy. He's in that range, hopefully a little bit faster. So good pro day for Valladay, to put it politely. But when you look at what he was able to put together, it really makes you wonder and like really affirms your questioning of why wasn't he in Indianapolis? Like, it felt like a major snub. And he showed out at the Shrine Bowl earlier in the year as well, instead of going to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. And in spite of the fact that he hasn't gotten all of the best opportunities given to him, like I said, he didn't go to Mobile. He went to Vegas for the Shrine Bowl. He didn't go to the Combine in Indianapolis. He participated at ASU's workout at their pro day. Like, he hasn't gotten all the exposure that he deserves, and yet he still made the most out of it. Valladay has absolutely had a very, very good draft circuit for himself. He's just not getting the publication yet. And I'm hoping with under a month to go that maybe people can start generating some more hype around him and we can see him drafted, because I think he does deserve to get drafted. And I think that there is a spot for him in the pros. For what it's worth, this is a guy who rushed for over 4,000 yards, 3,000 yard seasons, almost 6 yards a carry, 37 touchdowns. I mean, he's got the frame of work. He's got the workouts. He's got the work ethic. This is definitely an NFL guy. Hopefully NFL teams will begin to come around to that conclusion as well. And this pro day is really just going to help solidify that status, in my opinion, for X Vallladay. The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, back into our conversation, taking a look at the pro day numbers for Arizona State Sun Devils. Kind of a best of the rest, I suppose. You know what? Before we get that far, I do want to talk about Kyle Soelle, because Soelle was so underrated for ASU this past year. And it feels like he really did not get nearly enough credit for the season that he put together. He had, I think, 8 or 9 games of double-digit tackles. He led the team with 110 stops. He had 2 interceptions. He was making plays in the backfield. He was great in coverage. He was a leader, a vocal leader. He's been at the program for 5 years. Like, this is a guy that we're not going to talk about in 10 years. And it's a shame, because he truly put together such an underrated career at Arizona State. And I do think that there's hope for him at the next level. Looking at Kyle Soelle, I mean, the dude is built like a grizzly bear. He ended up measuring in, I got to pull this up so that I am for sure on these numbers. He measured in, oh my goodness, I can't even find it. He's close to 6'4" if he's not officially there. I know that's what he was listed on the team's website. But dude's tall, dude's big, and I think that his athleticism was probably a little overlooked at Arizona State. And he ended up putting together a really good pro day that showed off that he does have a lot more athleticism than people maybe would have been willing to give him credit for. He had 24 bench reps of 225. Pretty darn good, if you ask me. 32.5-inch vertical and a 4.57 40-yard. And that's the number that really stands out to me, because he said this in an interview, and I unfortunately would have agreed with him, is that he felt like not a fast guy. He felt like someone in the 4.7s, and that's what he said. And quote, I thought a lot of teams thought I would run a 4.7 40-yard dash. I kind of laughed at that. No way I would ever run a 4.7. I've never run a 4.7. I obviously blew that out of the water today. I would agree. And that's just typical, I don't know ball, especially when it comes to Arizona State, I suppose. But I'm really, really happy that Kyle Soelle ended up having a really good pro day, because this is hopefully going to generate the conversation for him as well to be able to get to that next step, because I do think that there is a place for him in the pros. I don't know that his ceiling is massive or overly high, but then again, I don't feel that way about very many of the guys entering this year, if any. I do think that Kyle Soelle is much better than anyone has been willing to give him credit for during this draft cycle. And I really, really hope that this is something that ends up kickstarting his draft hype. Like I said earlier, there's under a month to go in the draft process at this point. So evaluations are going to be finishing up, and we're going to be getting to the finish line here very, very soon. Hopefully people can catch up on Kyle Soelle, because this is a football player, and he's got the measurements, guys. Like that is already so important, because I feel like that was something that hurt Darian Butler last year. He was a small linebacker at 5'10". That's not the case with Soelle. He's an undersized linebacker. That's not the case with Soelle. He's got the NFL measurements, and now he's got the NFL athleticism that they're looking for. When you have those two together and you have production, like, you can definitely make that correlation to take him to that next step and place him in the pros. And I hope that that's the way the NFL teams are going to be walking away from his pro day as well, because I think that there was a lot of positive here with Kyle Soelle. This was one of the more impressive pro days of the Sun Devils. I would tell you that he was probably the most impressive after Valladay. There's a handful of other guys who had really good pro days as well. I thought Merlin Robertson put together a pretty good day. Nothing mind-blowing across the board, but he did have 20 bench reps, 33-inch vertical jump, and a 10-foot, 1-inch broad jump. Has the athleticism. He's built more like that modern linebacker. And again, like similar to Soelle, but a little lesser in extent. He's got the traits that you're looking for the next level, with the size, with the athleticism. The production is okay. Like, he never took that next step after his freshman year, but that's okay, because he was still a good player. He's a veteran. If he can show some special teams prowess, he can make it in the pros. Those were the four guys I felt were the biggest winners of the pro day. Those were the guys who definitely stood out to me the most. Want to mention to you guys to check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton, bringing everything you need to know on and off the court. Hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the college hoops landscape. It's Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you're getting your podcasts. Putting a bow on it, some other players that I want to point out. Tamarcus Davis, very interesting. I don't know if anyone outside of Arizona State knows who Tamarcus Davis is. And even Arizona State fans may not be overly familiar with Davis, because his play time did diminish down the season because of the play of Ro Torrance and Ed Woods on the outside. And Davis has the physical aspects to be in the pros. He's over 6 foot. He's pretty quick. I didn't see an official 40 time for any of these guys. I don't think his was anything too insane, but he did test very well athletically with a 41-inch vertical and an 11-foot broad jump. Dude's got hops. And for a defensive back, that's important. That's really important to see those kind of traits in somebody who's going to be running more than anybody else on the field, more than likely. Like, this was a really good pro day for Tamarcus Davis. And I think my biggest hope for Tamarcus with the results of this pro day will be that it will be able to generate some conversation for him as like a priority free agent, and that teams will look at him to potentially bring on during the undrafted process and see if he can be a camp body and stick on. I don't know. Like, we'll see. Looking at the unofficial times that were recorded, it looks like they got Tamarcus at a 4.48, which that would be his best time, and that would be a win in my book for somebody who's not the fastest guy in the room, but you don't want him to be the slowest either. I think that's a win. Some of the other guys who stood out, Case Hatch, fullbacks matter, people. And the NFL doesn't love fullbacks at all. But if you can find yourself a niche, you can find yourself a place in the league. If you can find a way to be a Patrick Ricard or a Kyle Juszczyk, you're going to have a long career in the NFL. And we'll be hoping that Case Hatch can be the next one of those guys. He had pretty good day all around, did have a whopping 27 bench reps, throwing up all that steam at 235 for the fullback. Good for him. Happy to see that. Some of the other numbers that stood out, Charles Hall also had a 40.5-inch vertical and an 11-foot 1-inch broad jump. Maybe he will be able to throw his name out there as a player that could be potentially a undrafted free agent kind of priority guy. I don't want to say disappointed, but I don't think that Corey Bethley did him enough favors at this pro day. I think that he proved that he is still like an average to an above average athlete, but not a lot of people were talking about him heading into the pro day, heading into the draft process. And I don't think that really changed. And I really hope that that's not true, because I am a big Corey Bethley fan. I think that he's a very good football player. I think he's a lot better than a box score will tell you. And even then, I think his box score is deceptive. I'm hoping that even though he didn't have the craziest numbers in the world, that this could still potentially be a guy that teams look at down the road. He really didn't do himself too many favors. And the 40 time is what absolutely killed him. If this is even somewhat accurate, he had a 4.68 40 for a defensive back. That is slow. And that's not what you want to see. He did have a rock solid 34.5-inch vertical. For what it's worth, Jack Jones had a 35-inch vertical last year. He's playing in the pros. We'll see, I suppose. But overall, and Trevez Moore also didn't stand out the way I was hoping he would. But overall, I feel like this was a pretty good pro day for Arizona State. I feel like more guys had larger success than guys who didn't. Valladay and Kyle Soelle, definitely for me, the biggest winners from the pro day. I think that overall, these guys did a good job for themselves, hoping that they can continue to build upon that with less than a month left. They've got some time to do some workouts. They got some time for more interviews and preparing and everything, but we are reaching the end of the draft process, and I will be working on my personal reports for these guys. I would love to try and get those published to you guys and put out there so that you know everything I know as far as I'm concerned. I would love to stay in touch with everything that's going on with the draft process. So obviously you'll have that here. For tomorrow's podcast, we got to talk about Bobby Hurley's press conference that happened. It was today, but at the time of tomorrow, it will have been yesterday. And some of the transfer news that's going on. Another Arizona State Sun Devil basketball player entered the portal. We'll talk about it tomorrow. So to stay in touch with that, wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like and subscribe and turn on those notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter. You can find me at Richie Bradshaw36, and you can find the podcast on Twitter as well at LO_Sun Devils. That's all that I got for you guys on today's edition of the Locked On Sun Devils. Till next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.